On April 15, 2026, while the world was watching American blockade ships close the Strait of Hormuz, a photo just over 1 megabyte started circulating in an 8-person WhatsApp group. The photo showed an Israeli soldier in olive drab fatigues standing in the middle of a bombed-out Maronite church in southern Lebanon. He was holding a construction sledgehammer in his right hand. At his feet, on a cracked marble floor, 3 pieces of a stone statue of Jesus Christ: a nose, a raised arm, and a head looking up. The soldier's name is Noam Halperin, 28 years old, reservist with the Givati Brigade. 51 days of combat in Lebanon, and the cousin he'd grown up with buried 22 days earlier in a rocket strike in Haifa that nobody in the civilian news cycle remembers by name. 6 hours after the photo was taken, it had leaked. Within 24 hours, the whole world had seen it. Within 48, Noam was locked in solitary confinement at Prison 6, Atlit, with a 30-day sentence. 4 days into the cell, at 3:14 in the morning, something happened that doesn't appear in any official report. What he says happened, the security camera didn't record. But 3 sources, one of them public, one you can verify on Google right now, confirm that something changed between night 3 and night 4. Noam came out of that cell barred from combat. He wrote a 4-page letter. The IDF blocked it. His family broke. Online extremists leaked his address. He records today from a moshav on the backside of Ramat HaSharon, with his face uncovered and his real name. In his own words, this was the name that swung the hammer, so this has to be the name that speaks. From here on out, it's Noam himself telling it. This is his story, in his words.
It was 1420. I hit it 3 times. The first one was a reaction. I didn't think. I picked up the hammer with both hands and I hit the nose of the statue. A piece the size of my hand fell to the marble floor, stone against stone, and then the sound of the piece rolling. The second was to convince myself the first one hadn't hurt me. I hit the raised arm. It broke at the elbow. The third was to finish it. I hit the head. The head came off whole. I'm Noam Halperin. I'm the man in the photo, and everything I'm about to tell you starts there, at 1420, in a half-standing church in southern Lebanon, on April 15th, 2026. My full name is Noam Dov Halperin, 28 years old, Rav Turai, Givati Brigade, reservist, miluim, that's what we call it in Hebrew. In civilian life, I was a warehouse manager at a logistics company near the port of Ashdod. I lived in Holon, a suburb south of Tel Aviv. These days I live in a place I can't say out loud because my address has been leaked once already and I'm not letting it happen again. I'm an only child. My father was a GSS reservist, Shin Bet as you know it abroad, but he doesn't talk about what he did. My mother is a biblical literature teacher at a public high school in Holon. That's going to matter later. My family wasn't religious in the way you picture it when you hear Israeli family. We didn't do Shabbat with lit candles and the father reading Torah. We did Shabbat with dinner at my grandmother's, cold fish, a bad supermarket wine, and the Maccabi game on mute on the living room TV, because turning the TV on and off on Shabbat was a line my mother drew and my father respected without arguing. But the Bible came into the house every single day, because my mother taught it for a living. Bereshit, Shemot, Samuel, Kings, the prophets. She'd prep her lessons at the kitchen table on Sunday nights, and I'd eat my sandwich on the other side of the table, watching her underline Isaiah in red pencil. I never read it. She never asked. It was her subject. In my head, that material was as far from what we lived as an MRI lecture would be to you over dinner. It was a parallel world, my mother's. My father was the opposite. He left the house at 5 in the morning and got back at 10 at night. When he got back, he ate standing at the kitchen counter, washed his plate, went to bed. In 15 years, I don't think my father told me a single complete story about his own life. I know he served in Sayeret Matkal in the 90s. I know he went into Shin Bet after that. I know he left in 2014 over something that involved Gaza, and he hasn't touched the subject since. My father's silence was the loudest thing in my house. And then there was Tomer. Tomer was my cousin, but he was more than that. His mother and mine are sisters. He and I are 3 months apart. We grew up on the same street in Holon, the same school, the same Herzliya beach in the summer. We did army together, Givati, both of us, same platoon for the first 8 months until he transferred to Golani. After the army, we shared a small apartment in Florentine, in Tel Aviv, for 2 years. He worked in graphic design. I was already at the warehouse. We played PlayStation until 3 in the morning and woke up dead for work. Tomer was the kind of person who laughs loud in a restaurant and isn't embarrassed. I'm the kind of person who stays quiet in the corner watching. We balanced each other out. Jesus in that house, on that street, in that whole life I'm describing, was never even a suspended word. He wasn't taboo, he wasn't forbidden. He was just the name Christians use. And Christians were them, tourists on the Via Dolorosa, nuns at the entrance of the Holy Sepulchre, a Filipina neighbor of Tomer's aunt who went to Mass on Sunday. I never had a single conversation about Jesus in my life, not even to dismiss him. He simply didn't exist in my mental geography. I want to be honest about this because it'll matter later. I wasn't against God. I was indifferent. You don't argue with an idea that never struck you. My mother prayed quietly before eating on the holidays. My father put a kippah on his head at other people's funerals. I did those things too, by mimicry, the same way you stand up when a national anthem plays without thinking about the anthem. It was protocol. It was part of belonging to a place. It wasn't faith. In the army, we had a unit rabbi who showed up on the holidays and handed out honey for Rosh Hashanah. We ate the honey, we said thank you, we went back to work. Nobody argued. Indifference isn't a position, it's an absence. It's having nothing to say when the topic comes up. I lived 28 years staring at my wrist while my mother prayed. I never once looked at her face while she was praying, not once. On March 24, 2026, my cousin Tomer died in a rocket strike in Haifa. I need to tell you this with the right details because if I don't, you won't understand what happened in the church. It was a Friday night. Hezbollah had fired a battery of Zelzal 3 rockets out of the Bekaa Valley. Iron Dome got 14 of the 18, but 4 came through. One of them landed on the apartment building of a friend of Tomer's in Hadar HaKarmel, where they were watching a game. Tomer's last audio in the family WhatsApp group came in at 23:47, 11 seconds. He was talking about buying tickets for the Maccabi Haifa versus Hapoel Beersheva game the following Sunday. You can hear his friends laughing in the background. 23:51, the rocket hit. The siren had gone off at 23:49, 2 minutes before. They were on the second floor. There was a shelter 2 staircases down. Nobody went down. I found out that 40% from my aunt, who called my mother screaming a name I couldn't make out from the other side of the house. I left barefoot. I drove from Holon to Haifa 2.5 hours in my underwear and a t-shirt, sandals on the gas pedal. I got to Rambam Hospital at 3 in the morning. My aunt hadn't been able to make the ID yet. They identified him at 4:10 by the cord he wore around his neck, a leather cord with nothing hanging from it, that my grandmother had given him when he was 6. His face was gone. I saw my aunt's face when she came out of the identification room. I was 28 and I'd seen a lot in the army. I had never seen anyone with that face before. It was as if she had stepped out of herself and left the body standing there. From that night on, I haven't slept a full night. That's not a metaphor. To this day, I sleep in 2-3-hour blocks. I wake up, I stare at the ceiling, I doze again. That's how I got to Lebanon, sleeping 4 hours a night in a country at peace, then sleeping 3 a night after they called me up. I was called up on February 22nd, 2026, the day after the strike that killed Khamenei. We'd been watching the announcements all week. We knew the call-up was coming. When the phone rang, I was at the warehouse checking a shipment of industrial bearings out of Turkey. My boss, a 50-year-old woman named Rinat, knocked on the office door and handed me the phone without saying anything. It was District Command, 48 hours. I hung up, looked at Rinat. She just nodded and walked out so I could have a minute alone. I did my mandatory service from 18 to 21, Givati Brigade, infantry, 3 years. Honorably discharged. I wasn't commando, I wasn't elite, but I was a consistent soldier. Reservist since 21. I do my miluim every year. 30 days of some low-intensity exercise, usually in July. I'd never been called up for a real war before. I went down to Tselim base on February 24th for 2 weeks of refresher training. I shot at the range, relearned how to put a plate carrier on and off, relearned how to clear a house with a closed door. We slept in reservist tents, 8 men per tent, iron cots, half snoring, half crying quietly. Nobody comments on the next guy in the morning. On March 5th, we crossed the border into southern Lebanon. It was my first time in Lebanon. I was 28. The place looked like Israel, but with less maintenance. Same olive trees, same fences, same narrow roads, but the streetlights bent, the walls cracked, every house with a broken window. Field life in southern Lebanon in March and April 2026. We slept 3 hours a night, max. House by house in empty villages, sweeping. Orders changed by the hour because the intel was bad. Hezbollah drone overhead all night. You don't fear dying, you understand. You fear not being awake the second you need to be. That's worse than fear. It's a tension that doesn't let go. You drink coffee until your tongue burns and your eyes still close mid-patrol. In 50 days, I talked to my mother maybe 6 times total, to my father 0, to Tomer's mother 0. I knew if I heard her voice, I wouldn't come back from Lebanon. For you to understand where we were on April 15th, it had been 54 days since the war went open scale. Khamenei dead on February 28th, his son Moshtaba sworn in on March 8th. American blockade ships had reached Hormuz on March 12th. Trump had said he wasn't in a hurry. Hezbollah had officially entered the war on March 15th. The Lebanon ceasefire had been announced on April 11th and was extended for 3 weeks on April 22nd, 3 days after what I'm about to tell you. Officially, April 15th was inside the ceasefire. In practice, we were still sweeping villages in the buffer zone because nobody trusted it. It was my 51st day of combat. We left position at 10 in the morning. Me, Yaniv, Roy, and a sergeant named Adi who'd just come back from medical leave. The mission was to clear a small Maronite village about 8 kilometers northeast of Tyre. The village had been evacuated in February when the war started. Artillery had passed through the night before because intel had picked up a radio signal from one of the buildings. When we got there at 1340, the village was a dead village. About 20 buildings, half standing, half not. Olive trees burned on one side. A dog tied to a post, dead. Absolute silence. You've never heard a silence like the silence of a village that took artillery the night before. It's not empty silence, it's the silence of something that has just finished. We went in formation, sweeping house by house, door by door. Every door, hand on the knob, the other guy behind with the rifle, 3, 2, 1, open. Nobody. Empty living room, empty kitchen, empty bedroom. 6 houses an hour. Then we got to the church. The church was at the center of the village, small, Maronite, a cross on the roof that had fallen and lay sideways. The front of the church was still up, the left side was still up, but the apse, the back where the altar is, had taken the direct hit. Roof open, pews broken, marble floor cracked diagonally. We went in by protocol, me in front, Yaniv behind. Roy and Adi stayed at the outer door covering. In the middle of the nave, where the pews were tipped sideways, whole, intact, without a single crack, was a stone statue of Jesus Christ. White stone, 1 meter 40, one hand raised, the other open at chest height. I don't know if it was marble or limestone. It was a clear white stone with gray veins. It was the only whole thing in that place. I looked at it and I felt something I still don't have the right word for. It wasn't anger at the statue. It was anger at everything that was still standing while Tomer wasn't. It was anger at the fact that a piece of stone from 2,000 years ago had survived the 2026 Israeli artillery shelling, while my 28-year-old cousin had been evaporated by an Iranian rocket on a Friday night in Haifa. It was an equation my brain couldn't accept. On the left side of the nave, next to the half-fallen wall, there was a hammer. The construction kind, wooden handle, steel head, about 3 kilos. Someone had been doing repair work on the church before the war and had left the tool there. I picked up the hammer. Yaniv was at the door laughing at something Roy had said outside. He didn't see me pick it up. By the time he saw, I was already standing in front of the statue, hammer in both hands, the statue's gaze tilted slightly upward the way these statues always are. The watch on my wrist, a black G-Shock that Tomer had given me for my 25th birthday, read 1419.
Quick pause here in the middle. If this story is holding you, do something simple for me. Drop a like and subscribe to the channel. That's what keeps stories like this coming to you. And while we're here, if you've made it this far, maybe something close to what you're hearing has happened to you, or to someone you love, and maybe nobody believed you. We started a project for exactly that. Signs from Heaven is a book of 100 real encounters with Jesus, written by ordinary people. You can read the first volume, or you can send us your own story. Sending costs nothing. There's a QR code on screen, and the link is in the pinned comment and in the description. Now back to the story.
The first time I swung, I closed my eyes. I want to be precise about this. I closed my eyes the exact second the hammer touched the stone. It wasn't fear, it was reflex, like a sneeze. My body blinked before my head did. When I opened my eyes again, the nose of the statue had turned to dust in front of me, and there was a piece the size of my hand on the floor between my feet. The second time I didn't close them. I hit the raised arm, the right one, the one held up like in blessing. It broke at the elbow. The hand and forearm fell together in one piece and stood there for a second before tipping over. The third was the head. I remember thinking, in the second before the third, if I stop now, it'll be worse than if I finish. I swung. The head came off whole. It rolled half a meter across the cracked marble, stopped face up, eyes still open, staring at the ceiling. When I lowered the hammer, I heard Yaniv laugh. It wasn't mocking laughter. It was nervous laughter, the kind that comes out when you've just seen something your brain doesn't know how to file. Yaniv was 23. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and filmed me, maybe 15 seconds. Then he lowered the phone, looked at me and said, "Achi, I have to post this." Achi means brother in Hebrew, slang. He called everyone in the unit Achi that month. I didn't say anything. I lowered the hammer to the floor, walked out of the church, and went outside to smoke. By 8 that evening, the photo was in a Telegram group of 8 people from the unit. By 11, it was in a bigger group of 40. By 2 in the morning, somebody had screenshotted it and posted it on an anonymous Twitter account. By 6, it was on Ynet. By 9, on the New York Times. By 10, on Al Jazeera. By noon, the IDF spokesperson had confirmed authenticity. By 2 in the afternoon, exactly 24 hours after the third strike, 150 Jewish leaders of the diaspora had signed a public letter condemning the act as Chilul Hashem, desecration of the name. I learned all of this from inside a temporary holding cell in Tyre, because they'd arrested me at 4 in the morning on April 16th. They took my belt, took the cord off my neck, took my shoelaces. 2 days later, they transferred me to prison 6 in Atlit, solo cell, 30 days. Yaniv was arrested too, 30 days. I haven't spoken to him since the 16th. Cell 6 of prison 6 was 3 meters by 2, concrete, a metal cot bolted to the wall, a thin foam mattress, a gray blanket, a doorless toilet in the corner, a steel sink, a small frosted window high up, a fluorescent light on the ceiling that stayed on 14 hours a day and off 10, nothing else. I had 30 minutes of yard a day, alone. They isolated me, for my protection more than for punishment. The first 3 days I couldn't sleep, not even in blocks. I lay there staring at the ceiling and when I closed my eyes, I saw the piece of the nose falling on the church floor, on loop. My mind couldn't get past that first piece. By the third night, I started talking to myself. It wasn't prayer. I was talking to Tomer. I'd talk quietly so the God wouldn't hear. 3, 4 hours a night. I'd apologize, complain, tell him what I'd done. I never mentioned it had been a Jesus statue. I'd just say, I broke something. The night of the 19th was the fourth night. 3:14 in the morning. I woke up because of heat. The cell had been cold all day. It was April, late April, but Atlit at night is cold and the heating didn't reach the isolation block. I'd slept in my clothes with the blanket on top, and I'd still woken up twice the night before from the cold. That fourth night at 03:14 I woke up in heat, as if someone had turned a heater on. The air had weight. I felt the blanket sticking to my skin. I sat up on the cot. There was a man standing between the cot and the door. He looked about 30, olive skin, black curly hair, dusty like someone who had walked along a dirt road, black beard, untrimmed, not long, the thickness of a man who hadn't shaved in 2 weeks, earth-colored linen clothes torn at both cuffs and at the hem, barefoot. His hands were thick, calloused, the fingers slightly bent from working with a tool. No halo, no special light, no white tunic, no choir in the background. If I'd seen him on a street in any Lebanese village in 2026, he wouldn't have stood out. He was identical to any of the men we'd ordered out of their houses in the village the day before. He spoke in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, not biblical Hebrew, not literary Aramaic, no strange accent. Modern street Hebrew, the same Hebrew I speak with the gas station attendant. He said, Lama hikit oti? Why did you hit me? I looked at him. I looked at the cell door, which was still closed. I looked at the camera in the corner up high. I looked at my own hand. I looked back at him. I said, You're dead. That was stone. He said, The stone was stone, but every blow landed. You felt it. That's why you came back 3 times. I stayed sitting on the cot, he stayed standing. We were like that for 30 seconds without speaking. I didn't feel fear. I felt something more complicated than fear. I felt that thing you feel when you walk into a house you know, but all the furniture is in the wrong place. My head couldn't process the geography of the cell with him in the middle of it. The whole conversation lasted 8 minutes. I know because I checked the cell block clock. That digital one on the corridor wall that you can see through the gap under the door. I looked at the start, 03:15. I looked at the end, 03:23. I won't be able to reproduce the whole conversation word for word. I tried to write it down on the first day after, on the paper they gave me, and I couldn't. Some of what he said doesn't fit into a sentence afterward. It's not that I forgot, it's that the whole sentence doesn't survive being repeated. What I can tell you, he knew Tomer's name. He spoke Tomer's name without me having said it. He talked about the last audio at 23:47. He talked about my aunt's face coming out of the identification room at 4:10. He talked about the leather cord my grandmother had given Tomer when he was 6. He said, You didn't hit a piece of stone, you hit a mirror. Every blow landed in you before it landed in the statue. That's why you came back 3 times. You wanted the third one to hurt me too, because the first one hurt you. It didn't. I asked then the right thing. I asked, Who are you? He held out his right hand. There was a scar on the wrist, old, not fresh, about 2 centimeters across, running through the wrist as if a nail had passed through there and the skin had closed over time. He didn't say the name. I did, quietly in Hebrew, the Hebrew form of the name, Yeshua. He nodded once, slowly. Before he left, he said the only sentence I can reproduce in full, exactly the way he said it because I wrote it on the paper the second he left. He said, The photo stayed in the world. Your voice has to stay too. Not so you can redeem yourself. so that someone who has done worse than you knows it isn't closed. He vanished. He didn't walk away. He didn't move toward the door. He simply wasn't there anymore. And the heat went with him. And the cell was cold again in less than 3 seconds. And I slid off the cot to the concrete floor. I stayed on my knees there for about 20 minutes. It was the first time since Tomer's death that I cried. And when I cried, it wasn't for the statue. It was for Tomer. I need to give you the 3 sources that aren't me, because if I don't, this story is just my word, and my word at this point in my life isn't worth much. First, the security camera in cell 6 of prison 6. Every IDF solo cell has 24-hour camera coverage. The recording from the night of April 19th to 20th is archived. My lawyer obtained the copy during the disciplinary process. On the recording, you can see me wake up, sit up on the cot, and start speaking. You can hear my voice. You can see me slide to the floor at the 8-minute mark and stay on my knees. You can't see the man. The camera is functioning, the picture quality is good, the concrete is visible, the cot is visible, the door is visible. The man does not appear in the image, but the audio caught pauses on my end that respond to questions nobody asked from the corridor. Anyone who watches with attention will hear that I'm answering. Second, the night shift guard's log. Rav Shmuel Barak, night shift, isolation block, April 19th to 20th. At 3:17 he wrote in the book, heard conversation coming from cell 6, opened the viewport, detainee on his feet, did not see a second person, possible unauthorized visit, returned to desk. The log is stamped, signed, in the IDF system. Anyone who files a formal request can confirm the entry. Third, the photo you saw. That photo exists. You can pause this video right now, open Google and check. I'm the man in the photo. The photo is real, traceable, dated, publicly confirmed by the IDF. The photo is what started everything. And it's the most public evidence that exists that 24 hours before the conversation in the cell, I was the man who'd raised the hammer. On the 9th day of the cell, April 28th, I got a letter from my mother. The solo cell allowed censored correspondence. Everything that came in was screened. The letter arrived in a gray envelope with the IDF stamp. Inside, a single white sheet folded in 3. My mother hadn't written anything. Not her name, not Dear Noam, not I love you. The whole sheet was the text of Acts 9, verses 3 to 9, copied by hand, in her small slanted teacher's handwriting, in Hebrew, from the Hebrew edition of the New Testament. As he was traveling and approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven shone around him. Falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you, Lord? He asked. I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting, he replied. But get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. So they took him by the hand and led him into Damascus. He was unable to see for 3 days, and did not eat or drink. I read it sitting on the cot, with the door closed, at 11 on a Sunday morning. I read it once. I read it a second time. I read it a third time. Then I sat on the floor with the letter on my lap and stared at the wall for 40 minutes. I understood that my mother had spent those 9 days without writing me because she had been searching for the right passage. She's a biblical literature teacher. She has 400 passages in her head. She picked that one. The armed persecutor, the question, why are you persecuting me? The blindness, which in my case was the 30 days. 3 days without food, which in my case was the first 3 days I didn't sleep. Led by the hand to Damascus, which in my case was the fact that I had nowhere to go after the cell. I kept the sheet, folded it the same way it had been folded, put it in my pants pocket. When I left the cell, I took it with me. Today it sits folded on the table where I'm recording this video. I don't look at it while I speak, but it's in my peripheral vision. I know where it is. I served a full 30 days. I came out on May 17th, 2026 at 10 in the morning. A gray Lada was waiting at the gate with a civilian liaison officer and my mother. My father wasn't there. In the final hearing before release, they handed me the official document. I read it, signed it, handed it back. Two words stood out on the document: Pasul likrav, disqualified from combat. Pasul in Hebrew is the word the Orthodox use for a Torah scroll that has a scribal error and becomes useless for Shabbat reading. It's a heavy word in Hebrew. It means a thing that, by an unfixable defect, can no longer serve the function it was made for. I was a Pasul scroll for 48 minutes in that room before I signed. After signing, I became a civilian again. 3 days after release, I sat at my mother's kitchen table in Holon and wrote a letter, 4 pages, in Hebrew, asking forgiveness publicly from the Maronite Christians of Lebanon, from the family that owned the statue, from the Christian community worldwide. It wasn't a political letter, it was a specific apology, with the village name, the date, and the count of 3 blows. My lawyer submitted the letter to the IDF spokesperson requesting authorization for public release. They took 6 days to answer. The reply came from a woman I've never met, by email. Vetoed for operational reasons. No explanation, no appeal possible. I kept the letter. It sits folded across the table from where I record, next to the Acts 9 sheet. My father hasn't spoken to me since May 17th. He wasn't home when I arrived. My mother told me he had gone to his brother's place in Modi'in. I called him on the 3rd day. He answered, heard my voice, and hung up, without a word. I called twice more that week. He blocked my number. My mother is different. My mother sends me an audio every Shabbat at 6 in the evening when the candles are already lit at her place. She doesn't say anything in the audios. She just cries. 40 seconds, sometimes a minute. I listen to all of them. I don't reply. I still don't know how to reply. On May 22nd, somebody posted my Holon address in a far-right forum. My apartment had its front window broken on the 23rd at 4 in the morning by a rock. Written on the rock was my name in Hebrew with black spray paint. I was sleeping in the back room, so I wasn't near the window. I called the police. They came, made a report, and advised me to leave the city. I left on May 24th with 1 backpack. I came to live in a Messianic moshav in Ramat HaSharon. In the back of it, a place that takes in refugees from religious families. There are about 40 residents. Half are ex-Orthodox Jews who converted and got expelled from home. The other half are converts from the secular world who didn't fit into any synagogue. Nobody here is like me, but everyone in part understands what it is to be cut off from your own family for something you did with your own body. At the moshav, I work at the food storehouse, the same thing I did in Ashdod, only without a salary. I live in a guest room at the back of a family home, 3 meters by 2.5, a simple bed, a desk, a window. That's where I'm recording this now. If you're listening to me, if you've come this far, you're looking at the same window I am. Outside, the afternoon. I record in the afternoon because in the morning I work at the storehouse and at night I haven't slept right since March. On the desk, in the angle the camera doesn't catch well, 2 folded papers. The Acts 9 sheet my mother sent. The 4-page letter the IDF blocked. I don't read either of them while I record. I know what's written on them. I'll admit one thing. I don't know if Jesus comes back. I don't know if he appears again. I don't pray every day. I tried and it felt false, so I stopped. I read the Bible now, but I read it slowly, like someone eating food they've never had. I haven't changed my name. I wasn't baptized in the community pool, even though they offered. I don't exactly know what I am right now. But one thing has changed, structurally, inside of me, and I can name it. I don't hit anything anymore. Not a person, not a thing. Not even myself when I wake up at 3:14 in the morning and remember. I know you may have done worse than I have. That's why I'm speaking. If it closed for me, it would close for you too. It doesn't close. That's what he told me before he left the cell. I'm just repeating.
I don't have the words to close this, so I'll just repeat what he said at the end. It doesn't close. It didn't close for him, and he hit a piece of stone 3 times. It probably doesn't close for you either, whatever you're carrying. If you had broken what Noam broke, could you sit down and record this video? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe, hit the bell. If these stories move you, the join button down there is what lets me keep tracking the next ones down. In the next video, a Hezbollah man on the other side of the border who also heard a voice. Soon. Until next time, Shalom.